Chapter 1. The Call That Changed Everything. Rain came down in sheets, turning the cobblestone streets of Ashford into rivers of black glass. Elara Moss pulled her coat tighter and quickened her pace, her breath misting in the October cold. She'd stayed too late at the archives again, lost in dusty ledgers that nobody else cared about. Her colleagues called it obsession. She called it survival, burying herself in numbers and silence so she didn't have to think about Daniel, about the wedding that never happened, about the whispers that followed her through town like ghosts. She turned down Craven Lane, where the gaslights flickered and died one by one, swallowed by the storm. The street narrowed here, pressed between buildings so old their stones seemed to exhale centuries. This was the part of town the tour guides avoided, where even the bravest locals walk quickly and never after dark. Elara should have known better. She heard the boy before she saw him, a thin, desperate cry cutting through the rain. "Please, somebody help." She stopped, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed at her to keep walking, to pretend she'd heard nothing. But the cry came again, and this time she heard the terror in it, raw and absolute. She found him in the mouth of an alley, a child no more than 7, soaked through, his face streaked with tears and rain. He clutched something in his hands, an old rotary phone, impossibly, the cord trailing into the darkness behind him like an umbilical cord to nowhere. "My sister," he gasped when he saw her. "She won't wake up. She's on the street and she won't wake up and nobody will stop." Where? Elara dropped to her knees beside him, gripping his thin shoulders. "Show me." He pointed down the alley with a shaking hand. Elara squinted into the rain-swept darkness and saw her, a young woman, maybe 17, collapsed against the alley wall. Her dress was torn, her auburn hair plastered to her face. And even from here, Elara could see she wasn't breathing right, shallow. Rattling gasps that sounded like death knocking. "Call an ambulance," Elara said, already moving toward the girl. "Call 999. Do you understand?" But the boy didn't move. He stood frozen, the phone still clutched in his white-knuckled hands, and whispered, "I already called. I called him." Elara didn't have time to ask what that meant. She reached the girl and pressed 2 fingers to her throat, searching for a pulse. It was there, but faint, fluttering like a moth against glass. The girl's skin was ice cold, and when Elara tilted her head back to check her airway, she saw the marks, 2 puncture wounds, precise and deep, just above the collarbone. Elara's breath caught. She'd seen marks like this before in books, in old woodcuts displayed in the museum, in the folklore section nobody ever visited. Stories dismissed as superstition, remnants of a darker age when people believed in things that hunted in the night. But those stories didn't leave real wounds on real girls dying in real alleys. What happened to her? Elara demanded, whirling on the boy. Who did this? The boy's eyes were too old for his face, haunted and knowing. The debt collectors came. "They said House Corvain owns our family now. They said we had 3 days to present ourselves or they'd take collateral." His voice broke. "They took Lissa. They fed on her and left her here like she was nothing. House Corvain." The name meant nothing to Elara, but the way the boy said it with reverence and terror in equal measure made her skin crawl. "The ambulance," she started, "won't come in time." The boy held up the phone, and Elara realized with a chill that it wasn't plugged into anything. The cord disappeared into shadow, into nowhere, and yet she could hear a faint ringing through the receiver. "So I called the only one who can save her. I called the Vampire King." Elara opened her mouth to tell him he was in shock, that he was confused, that there was no such thing, but the words died in her throat as the shadows at the end of the alley began to move. They didn't creep or slide. They gathered, pulling themselves together with purpose and intent, forming a shape that was tall and broad-shouldered, and terribly, utterly still. The rain stopped falling around him, as if even the storm recognized something that should not be challenged. He stepped into the faint glow of the distant streetlight, and Elara's heart forgot how to beat. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, sharp, cold, and designed to cut. His face could have been carved from marble, high cheekbones, a severe mouth, eyes so pale they seemed silver in the darkness. His dark hair was pulled back from his face, revealing the inhuman perfection of his features. He wore a long black coat that moved around him like living smoke, and when he looked at her, Elara felt the weight of centuries in that gaze. "You called," he said to the boy, his voice low and resonant, each word falling like a stone into still water. "You invoked the old contract. Do you understand what that means?" The boy nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Please, Lord Thorne, save her." I'll pay whatever price you ask. The vampire Lord Thorne, the boy had called him, turned his attention to the dying girl. He moved with inhuman speed, crossing the alley in a heartbeat, and knelt beside her with a grace that made Elara's breath catch. His fingers touched the girl's throat, traced the wounds there, and his expression hardened into something murderous. Corvain, he said, the name a curse on his lips. They grow bold. Then those silver eyes found Elara, still kneeling in the rain, her hands covered in the girl's blood, and she saw something flicker in them. Surprise, perhaps, or interest. You, he said, human woman, you smell of old paper and loneliness. Why are you here? Elara's mouth was dry, her heart racing, every nerve screaming at her to run. But she met his gaze and held it. Because that girl was dying, and this creature, whatever he was, might be her only chance. I heard the boy crying, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I came to help. Something that might have been approval crossed his perfect face. Brave, he murmured, or foolish. I haven't decided which. He turned back to the girl, bit into his own wrist without hesitation, and pressed the wand to her lips. Drink, he commanded, and impossibly, the girl obeyed, swallowing weakly. What are you doing? Elara whispered, horrified and fascinated in equal measure. Lord Thorne didn't look at her. Saving her life, and binding yours to mine in the process. His eyes found hers again, and this time there was something dark and knowing in them. You witnessed a blood debt invoked. You stood as second witness to the boy's call. Under the old laws, that makes you involved. I don't understand. You will. He lifted the girl effortlessly, cradling her against his chest. House Corvain broke the concord. They fed without permission, took collateral without trial, and left her to die in violation of the sanctuary laws. This means war. He looked at Elara, and she felt the weight of an inevitable future settling over her like a shroud. And you, brave fool, are now under my protection, whether you want it or not. Before Elara could protest, before she could demand answers or run or do anything sensible, the shadows rose around them like wings, and the world dissolved into darkness and cold and the sound of her own racing heart. When the darkness cleared, she was no longer in the alley. She was somewhere else entirely, somewhere that smelled of stone and ancient blood and secrets older than her bloodline. And the vampire king stood between her and the only door. Chapter 2. The House of Thorne. Elara's knees buckled the moment the shadows released her. She caught herself against cold stone, gasping, her stomach churning from whatever impossible thing had just happened. Teleportation, shadow walking. She didn't have words for it, didn't have a framework in her orderly, archival mind for magic that worked. Breathe, Lord Thorne said from somewhere behind her, his voice neither kind nor unkind. The disorientation passes quickly. Your mind is simply catching up to where your body now stands. Elara forced herself upright and took in her surroundings. They were in a vast entrance hall that belonged in a Gothic cathedral, not a private residence. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into darkness above. Massive pillars carved with symbols she didn't recognize rose, like stone sentinels. Candles burned in iron sconces, but their light seemed reluctant, as if afraid to push too far into the shadows. The boy stood near Lord Thorne, still clutching that impossible phone. The girl lay on a bench carved from black marble, her breathing steadier now, color returning to her cheeks. Whatever Lord Thorne had done, it was working. Where are we? Elara demanded, hating how her voice shook. Thornhaven. Lord Thorne moved to a side table and poured deep red liquid into a crystal glass. Wine, Elara hoped desperately. The ancestral seat of House Thorne, and your sanctuary for the foreseeable future. I didn't agree to. You stood witness to a blood oath. He turned to face her, and in the candlelight his beauty was almost painful to look at. The boy invoked the Concord of 1642, a contract between his family line and mine. I am bound to answer. And you, by bearing witness and offering aid, are bound to the outcome. If House Corvain learns your identity, they will kill you to prevent testimony before the Night Court. Elara's head spun. Night Court, blood oaths, houses. She laughed, high and brittle. 2 hours ago I was cataloging property deeds. Now you're telling me there's an entire civilization of vampires with courts and contracts, and I'm somehow caught in the middle of it. Yes. No apology in his tone. No comfort. Just flat ancient certainty. I want to go home. You can't. Lord Thorne set down his glass and touched. House Corvain will have watchers on your residence by now. They're efficient, if barbaric. Your scent was all over that alley. They'll track you. My scent? Elara's hands clenched into fists. I'm not a possession to be tracked or a witness to be hidden away. I'm a person with a life they will end. He crossed the distance between them with that unnatural speed, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. I understand. You're frightened. I understand your world has shifted on its axis. But you will not survive House Corvain's attention without protection. Mine is the only offer you'll receive. Why do you care if I survive? Something flickered in those silver eyes, too quick to name, too complex to decode. Because you stopped for a crying child. Because you knelt in the rain to save a stranger. Because witnesses, with your particular combination of courage and stupidity, are rare enough that I'd prefer not to see you butchered. He stepped back, giving her space. And because the laws I swore to uphold require it. Elara wanted to argue, to rage, to demand he send her back to her small, safe, predictable life. But she'd seen the wounds on Lyssa's throat. She'd seen the predatory grace in Lord Thorne's movements. And beneath her terror, her scholar's mind was already cataloging, analyzing, desperate to understand. How long? She asked quietly. Until House Corvain is brought before the Night Court and judged. 3 days, perhaps 4. His expression remained unreadable. You'll have a room, access to the library, freedom to move within Thornhaven's walls. But you cannot leave. Not until this is finished. The boy who'd been silent through this exchange finally spoke, his voice small and frightened. Will Lyssa be okay? Lord Thorne's severe features softened almost imperceptibly. She'll wake soon. My blood will repair the damage Corvain inflicted. She'll be weak for a day or 2, but she'll survive. He crouched to the boy's eye level. You did well, Thomas. You remembered the old words. You used the summoning phone your grandfather left you. You saved your sister's life. Grandfather said you were the only vampire who keeps his promises. Thomas's eyes welled with tears. He said if we were ever in trouble, you'd come. Your grandfather was a good man. I owed him a debt. Lord Thorne's hand rested briefly on the boy's shoulder. That debt is now paid. But House Corvain claims your family owes them. And I cannot simply erase legitimate contracts, even ones made under duress. Do you understand? Thomas nodded miserably. We can't go home. Not yet. But I will negotiate your release. You and Lyssa will shelter here until it's safe. Lord Thorne straightened. Mrs. Graves will show you to rooms. Food will be brought. Try to sleep. As if summoned by her name, a severe woman in Victorian-era dress appeared from the shadows. She was human, Elara could tell by the warmth in her skin, the naturalness of her movements, but her eyes held the same ancient weariness as Lord Thorne's. Come, children, Mrs. Graves said gently, holding out her hands. Let's get you settled. Thomas hesitated, looking between his unconscious sister and Lord Thorne. You'll keep us safe? You promise? I promise. The boy nodded and followed Mrs. Graves, who lifted Lyssa with surprising strength and carried her toward a doorway Elara hadn't noticed before. Their footsteps echoed away into silence, leaving Elara alone with the vampire who'd stolen her from her life. You didn't promise him you'd win, Elara observed. Just that you'd keep them safe. There's a difference. Lord Thorne's eyebrows rose fractionally. You're perceptive. Most humans don't catch the distinction. I work with contracts. Old ones. Mostly. Property law from the 1700s. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how wet and cold she was, how her clothes clung to her skin. I know careful language when I hear it. Then, you understand the position we're in. He moved to the fireplace, a massive thing carved with more of those strange symbols, and flames sprang to life without him touching them. Magic. More impossible things. House Corvain is ancient and powerful. They have allies. I have principles which are often inconvenient in politics. This will not be a simple matter. Why do they claim the boy's family? Likely a manufactured debt. Corvain specializes in predatory contracts, loans with impossible terms, favors that compound into indentured servitude. They've been expanding their territory for decades, taking families piece by piece. His jaw tightened. And I've been too distracted by other house conflicts to stop them. You sound guilty. I am. He looked at her directly, and she saw something raw beneath the cold control. I've been alive for 800 years. I've seen empires rise and fall. I've negotiated treaties between houses that should have slaughtered each other. But I cannot be everywhere, cannot save everyone. And families like Thomas's fall through the cracks. Elara moved closer to the fire, drawn by its warmth and by the strange vulnerability in his admission. 800 years, she repeated. I can't even imagine. Most can't. Time becomes different when you have infinite quantities of it. His eyes tracked her movements with predatory focus. You're shivering, Mrs. Graves will return shortly to show you to your quarters. There are clothes, hot water, whatever you need. What I need is to understand what's happening. Elara turned to face him across the fire. You said House Corvain broke laws. What laws? Who enforces them? The Night Court. 7 ruling houses, each holding territory and allegiances. We maintain the Concord rules that govern vampire-human interaction, feeding rights, territory disputes. He gestured to the symbols carved into the mantle. These are the Concord marks: consent, sanctuary, blood debt, ancient protections that most houses still honor. Most? Corvin has been testing boundaries for years. Tonight they crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. They fed on a child without consent, took collateral in violation of sanctuary law, and left her to die. His expression turned deadly. That is grounds for house dissolution. I will bring them before the court, and see them answer for it. And me? Where do I fit in this? You're my witness. Your testimony as an uninvolved human party carries weight the Night Court cannot ignore. He paused. But testifying will make you a target. They'll try to discredit you, frighten you, possibly kill you if they're desperate enough. So I'm bait. No, the word came out sharp. You're protected. Any vampire who touches you answers to me personally. I've held my seat on the Night Court for 3 centuries. My word still means something. Why should I trust you? The question hung between them like smoke. Lord Thorne studied her with those ageless eyes, and Elara had the unsettling sense he was seeing not just her face, but the architecture of her soul. All the broken places she usually kept hidden. You shouldn't, he finally said. I'm a vampire, a killer. I've ended lives and broken hearts and done things that would horrify you. But I keep my promises. And I promise that while you're under my protection, no harm will come to you. Elara wanted to argue, wanted to find the flaw in his logic, the escape route from this nightmare. But exhaustion was settling into her bones, and the fire was warm. And some treacherous part of her believed him. 3 days, she said, perhaps 4. Then I go home. Then you go home. He inclined his head slightly. You have my word. Mrs. Graves reappeared silently, and Elara jumped. Your room is prepared, miss, the woman said. This way. Elara followed, acutely aware of Lord Thorne's gaze on her back. At the threshold, she turned. What should I call you? Besides Vampire King, Thorne will suffice. Was that almost smile playing at his lips? Or, my lord, if you're feeling formal. I'm not. I didn't think so. Definitely a smile now, faint and strange and somehow sad. Sleep well, Elara Moss. Tomorrow the real complications begin. He knew her name. She hadn't told him her name, but before she could ask, Mrs. Graves was guiding her away, and the heavy door closed behind them with the finality of a tomb sealing shut. Chapter 3. The weight of observation. Elara didn't sleep. How could she, in a room that belonged in a museum? The bed was a 4-poster monstrosity draped in midnight blue velvet. The wardrobe held dresses from at least 3 different centuries, all in her size, which should have been impossible. But everything was impossible now. The window overlooked gardens. She couldn't see properly in the darkness. Though she caught glimpses of marble statuary and the glint of water features, she'd tried the door once, just to test it. Unlocked. Not a prisoner then. Just a reluctant guest in a vampire's Gothic fortress. By the time dawnlight started creeping through the heavy curtains, Elara had worn a path in the Persian rug with her pacing. She'd catalogued every painting on the walls, all originals. Some she recognized from art history texts. Examined the antique writing desk stocked with parchment and actual quills, and attempted to convince herself this was all an elaborate hallucination brought on by stress and loneliness. The puncture wounds on Lys's neck argued otherwise. When Mrs. Graves knocked at precisely 7 o'clock, Elara was already dressed in the most practical thing she could find, a simple wool dress in dark green that looked Victorian but felt surprisingly comfortable. Breakfast is ready. Mrs. Graves said, her expression as unreadable as Lord Thorne's. The dining room. If you'll follow me. The dining room was somehow both magnificent and melancholy. A table that could seat 30 held a single place setting at one end. Silver serving dishes held fresh bread, butter, jam, and what appeared to be a full English breakfast. A pot of tea steamed invitingly, but no Lord Thorne. Where is he? Elara asked, settling into the indicated chair. Sleeping, Mrs. Graves poured the tea with practiced efficiency. Vampires are diurnal sleepers. The sun weakens them considerably. Lord Thorne retires at dawn and rises at dusk. Has done for 800 years, regular as clockwork. So I won't see him all day? Not unless there's an emergency. Even then, waking him during day sleep is inadvisable. Something that might have been concern flickered across Mrs. Graves's severe features. Best to let him rest. He'll need his strength for what's coming. Elara sipped her tea. Perfect temperature, perfect strength, and studied the woman who seemed to run this impossible household. How long have you worked for him? 43 years. I came here as a girl, running from a bad situation. Lord Thorne offered me sanctuary and employment. I've never had cause to regret accepting either. You're not afraid of him? Terrified at first, Mrs. Graves's lips quirked slightly. But fear fades when you realize someone consistently chooses restraint over violence. He could drain me dry any night he pleases. Instead, he pays me fairly, respects my boundaries, and has never once used compulsion on me. She met Elara's eyes. There are worse employers in the world, miss. Most of them human. After breakfast, Mrs. Graves gave Elara a tour of the parts of Thornhaven she was permitted to access. The library alone could have swallowed Elara's entire apartment building, 3 stories of books, manuscripts, and scrolls in languages both familiar and utterly foreign. She found texts on vampire biology, house histories, blood magic theory, an entire section dedicated to the Night Court's legal precedents. You may read anything you like, Mrs. Graves said. Lord Thorne believes in informed guests. Though I'd avoid the restricted section, those texts require mental shields most humans don't possess. Elara spent the day lost in books, her scholar's mind desperate for framework and context. She learned that vampires couldn't create new vampires without Night Court approval. The process was strictly regulated to prevent overpopulation and discovery. She learned that feeding required explicit consent, recorded and witnessed, and that violations carried sentences ranging from exile to final death. She learned that House Thorne was one of the oldest and most respected lineages, known for holding to the letter and spirit of the law even when it disadvantaged them politically. And she learned that House Corvain had been building toward conflict for decades, accumulating power through exploitation while technically staying within legal boundaries, until last night. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Elara found herself drawn to a portrait gallery on the 2nd floor. Dozens of paintings lined the walls, all depicting the same man across centuries. Lord Thorne in medieval armor, in Renaissance finery, in Victorian mourning clothes, in modern suits, always alone, always with that same expression of controlled isolation. He doesn't commission them, you know. Elara spun. Thomas stood in the doorway, looking better rested, but still haunted. He sits for them because artists beg him to. Says it's payment for beauty he didn't earn and can't escape. How's your sister? Awake, angry. Thomas managed a small smile. She wanted to punch Lord Thorne for turning her into a damsel who needed rescuing. But Mrs. Graves explained, he literally saved her life. So now she just wants to punch House Corvain instead. Despite everything, Elara laughed. She sounds fierce. She is. Thomas moved to stand beside Elara, studying the portraits. Grandfather used to tell us stories about Lord Thorne, how he was turned against his will by a vampire who wanted a companion, and how he killed his maker when he learned what monsters they were. How he's spent centuries trying to make vampire society less monstrous. He pointed to a portrait from the 1600s. That's when he helped write the first Concord. Grandfather said half the houses wanted him dead for it. Why? Because it limited their power, made them treat humans like people instead of food. Thomas's expression darkened. House Corvain voted against every protection clause. They've been trying to dismantle the Concord ever since. Elara absorbed this, a new picture of Lord Thorne forming in her mind. Not just a beautiful monster, but something more complex, a vampire trying to civilize creatures that thrived on predation. He talks about you differently, Thomas said abruptly. What? When Mrs. Graves asked him this morning just after dawn, right before he went down, if you were dangerous, if you might run, he said. Thomas screwed up his face, remembering. He said, she stopped in the rain for a stranger. She knelt in filth to save a dying girl. She demanded answers from a vampire instead of cowering. No, Graves, she's not dangerous. She's dangerous to herself perhaps, but never to others. And then he said something weird. Elara's throat felt tight. What did he say? 800 years, and I still find myself surprised by human courage. Perhaps there's hope yet. Thomas looked up at her. What did he mean? Before Elara could answer, a bell began tolling somewhere deep in Thornhaven. Low and resonant, like a church bell calling the faithful to prayer or warning them of approaching danger. Mrs. Graves appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Miss Moss, Thomas, come with me quickly. The outer wards have been breached. House Corvain is here. Elara's blood turned to ice. But it's still daylight. You said vampires can move during the day if the need is great enough. It weakens them, burns them, but they can do it. Mrs. Graves was already herding them toward the stairs. They're desperate, and desperation makes them stupid. What about Lord Thorne? Elara demanded, as they rushed down corridors that seemed to twist in on themselves. Can he fight while the sun is up? He can wake, he can move, but he'll be slow, weakened. Against a full Corvain assault, Mrs. Graves's jaw tightened. We need to get you to the vault. It's warded, safe. They reached a heavy iron door, carved with those same Concord symbols Elara had seen on the mantel. Mrs. Graves pressed her palm to it, and it swung open, revealing stairs, descending into darkness. Down, now, both of you. Thomas grabbed Elara's hand and they descended together, the darkness swallowing them. Behind them, she heard Mrs. Graves beginning to close the door, and then came the sound of shattering glass and inhuman shrieking. House Corvain had broken through. Mrs. Graves, Elara screamed, but the woman shoved them the rest of the way down and slammed the door. The lock engaged with a sound like a death knell. They were trapped in the dark, while above them, vampires went to war, and Lord Thorne, weakened by daylight, was fighting alone to keep the monsters from the people he'd sworn to protect. Elara pressed her hands against the cold iron door and listened to the chaos above. Crashes, screams, something that sounded like thunder but couldn't be. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd known Lord Thorne for less than 24 hours. He was a vampire, a predator, something that shouldn't exist, but he'd promised to keep them safe, and somehow, impossibly, she believed he would keep that promise, even if it cost him everything. He'll be okay, Thomas whispered in the darkness, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. Grandfather said Lord Thorne survived the vampire wars of 1789. He survived everything. Elara held the boy's hand tighter and prayed. Thomas was right. Above them, the sounds of violence continued, and somewhere in Thornhaven's depths, a wounded vampire king fought against the Dawn and his enemies, both bound by honor to people he barely knew. The thought terrified and moved her in equal measure. Chapter 4. Blood in Daylight Vault was silent as a tomb. Elara and Thomas huddled together in the absolute darkness, their breathing too loud in the confined space. Above them, the sounds of violence had crescendoed into something apocalyptic, crashes that shook dust from the ceiling, screams that didn't sound human, and underneath it all, a low thrumming that Elara felt in her bones rather than heard. What is that sound? She whispered. Blood magic. Thomas's voice was small and frightened. Grandfather described it once. When vampires fight seriously, they pull power from their bloodlines. It resonates, like a war drum made of heartbeats. The thrumming intensified, and suddenly the sounds above went eerily quiet. Then came a voice, cold, cultured, dripping with contempt. It carried down through the stone itself, amplified by some supernatural means, so they couldn't help but hear it. Lord Thorne, how disappointing to find you so diminished. Does the sun burn, old friend? Does it make your ancient blood sluggish and slow? Elara's hands clenched into fists. That had to be one of House Corvain's leaders. State your business, Corvain, before I lose patience. Lord Thorne's voice came next, and Elara's breath caught. He sounded strained, each word carefully controlled, but underneath she heard pain. The sun was hurting him. Fighting was hurting him. He was hurt, and he was still standing between Corvain and the vault. My business? You harbor thieves and witnesses to crimes that never occurred. The boy and his sister belong to House Corvain by lawful contract. The woman is a trespasser in matters beyond her station. Surrender them, and we'll leave you to your recuperation. No contract involving children is lawful without night court review. You know this, Corvain. You wrote the minority opinion opposing it in 1-8 for 7. Lord Thorne's tone sharpened. And the woman is under my personal protection. You touch her. You answer to me. Choose your next words very carefully. A laugh, brittle and dangerous. Your protection means less each year, Thorne. The old ways are dying. Houses grow tired of your rigid morality, your endless rules. We're predators, not philosophers. It's time someone reminded you what that means. You want a reminder of what I am? Something shifted in Lord Thorne's voice, something ancient and deadly rising to the surface. Very well. But when you're bleeding out on my floor, remember you asked for this. The thrumming exploded into a roar. Elara heard impacts that cracked stone, snarls that belonged to beasts rather than men. Glass shattered, wood splintered. And through it all, that sound like drums, like hearts beating in terrible synchronization, like the earth itself was screaming. He's going to get himself killed, Elara said, moving toward the stairs. He's weakened and they're Miss Moss, don't. Thomas grabbed her arm. The wards on this door only open from outside during an attack. If you try to break through, you'll alert every vampire up there to our location. Lord Thorne sealed us in here for a reason. To die protecting us? Elara's voice cracked. I won't just hide while a massive impact shook the entire vault. Dust rained down. Thomas pulled Elara away from the stairs as cracks spiderwebbed across the iron door. They're trying to break through the wards, Thomas breathed. They know we're down here. The door buckled. Once, twice. The Concord symbols carved into it began to glow with pale light, resisting. But the assault was relentless. Then came a sound that stopped Elara's heart. Lord Thorne screaming in pain, not a grunt or a gasp. A genuine scream, torn from someone who'd learned to endure centuries of suffering in silence. No, Elara heard herself say. No, no, no. The door exploded inward. 3 vampires poured down the stairs, to men and a woman, all with the same cruel beauty, the same predatory grace. Their eyes gleamed red in the darkness. Their hands ended in claws that dripped with blood. Lord Thorne's blood. There you are, the woman purred. The little witnesses Lord Thorne is dying to protect. How sweet, how pointless. Elara shoved Thomas behind her, her mind racing through options. She had nothing, no weapons, no powers, no way to fight creatures that could move faster than thought. But she'd be damned if she'd go down without trying. You want them? She said, voice steadier than her hands. You go through me first. The vampires laughed. Mortal courage. How quaint. How utterly. The woman's head jerked back violently, her words cutting off. She stared down at the wooden stake protruding from her chest, confusion and fury warring on her perfect features. Then she crumbled to ash. Mrs. Graves stood on the stairs behind where the vampire had been, another stake already in her hand, her expression carved from granite. You were saying? The 2 remaining vampires spun toward her, snarling, but Mrs. Graves was already moving. She fought like someone who'd spent decades learning vampire weaknesses, economical, precise, utterly without mercy. She drove one vampire back with a stake to the shoulder, threw something at the other that sparked and smoked on contact, drawing a shriek of agony. Run. She shouted at Elara. Get to the library, there's a way out through the east window. Take the children and go. I'm not leaving you, go. Elara grabbed Thomas and ran, her heart hammering, her mind screaming at her to go back, to help, to do something other than flee like a coward. But Thomas needed her alive, and Mrs. Graves had just given them a chance they couldn't waste. They burst from the vault into absolute carnage. Thornhaven's entrance hall looked like a war zone. Pillars were cracked. Paintings hung in shreds. Scorch marks scarred the ancient stone. And in the center of it all stood Lord Thorne, surrounded by 4 Corvain vampires. Blood streaming from wounds on his face, his arms, his chest. Smoke rose from his exposed skin where sunlight streaming through the shattered windows touched it. He was burning, fighting and burning and still standing. Their eyes met across the destroyed hall. Elara, her name on his lips, rough with pain and something else, relief. Fear? Run. Not without you, she heard herself say, and meant it with a certainty that shocked her. One of the Corvain vampires, the one who'd spoken before, clearly their leader, smiled viciously. How touching. The human has developed feelings for her captor. Stockholm syndrome or genuine affection. Not that it matters. He moved toward Elara with inhuman speed. Lord Thorne was faster. He intercepted Corvain's leader mid-lunge, catching him by the throat and slamming him into the ground with such force that the floor cracked. I said, Lord Thorne growled, his voice dropping into something that barely sounded human. "She is under my protection." But the effort cost him. The other 3 Corvain vampires struck as one, driving Lord Thorne back, opening new wounds. He staggered, his face twisting with pain as sunlight caught his shoulder and smoke curled from the burn. He was going to lose. Not because he wasn't strong enough, but because the sun was crippling him, and the Corvain vampires knew it. Elara's eyes darted around the destroyed hall, looking for anything that could help. Her gaze landed on the heavy velvet curtains hanging in tatters by the window's sun-blocking curtains that had been shredded in the fight. An idea sparked. "Thomas," she shouted. "The curtains on the east wall help me." She didn't wait to see if he followed. She ran to the nearest intact curtain and started tearing it down, ignoring the screaming of vampires and the sound of Lord Thorne fighting for his life. Thomas appeared beside her, understanding instantly, and together they yanked the heavy fabric free. "Lord Thorne," Elara screamed. "Get down." He didn't question. He dropped low as she and Thomas ran forward with the curtain between them like a shield, blocking the sunlight streaming through the broken windows. The Corvain vampires shrieked as the sudden absence of sun weakening allowed Lord Thorne's full strength to return. He moved like death incarnate. One vampire fell to ash before Elara could blink. Another went down with Lord Thorne's hand through its chest, its scream cutting off as it disintegrated. The third tried to flee, but Lord Thorne caught it by the hair and snapped its neck with casual brutality before staking it through the heart. The leader, the one who'd spoken so confidently, stared at Lord Thorne with sudden, genuine fear. "The Night Court will hear of this," he hissed. "You've destroyed 4 members of a ruling house. This is war." "Good." Lord Thorne stalked toward him, and even wounded and burned, he was terrifying. "Tell your house that war is what they'll receive. Tell them I'm coming for every contract they've stolen, every family they've enslaved. Tell them House Thorne remembers how to break monsters." He grabbed the vampire by the throat. "And tell them the woman is mine to protect. Any who touch her die screaming." He threw the vampire through the broken window. The creature flew 20 feet before hitting the ground, scrambling up, and fleeing into the daylight despite the burns it would cause. Then Lord Thorne turned to face Elara and Thomas, still holding the curtain. And she saw the precise moment his strength gave out. He collapsed. Elara dropped the curtain and ran to him, catching his shoulders before his head hit the ground. Up close, she could see the extent of his wounds, deep gashes that were healing slowly. Burns from the sunlight that looked angry and raw. Blood, so much blood soaking through his clothes. "I'm fine," he said, which was such an obvious lie that Elara almost laughed. "Mrs. Graves is finishing off the last of them in the vault." Mrs. Graves's voice came from behind them. She looked battered but alive, blood on her hands and stakes still clutched in her grip. "They're dealt with, all of them." Lord Thorne nodded, wincing. His eyes found Elara's and she saw exhaustion there, and pain, and something that might have been wonder. "You came back. You could have run. Should have run. You're an idiot," Elara said, surprising herself. "Fighting them alone, burning in the sun. You could have died, but I didn't." His hand rose to touch her face, his fingers cold against her skin. "Because you stopped the sunlight. Because you're brilliant and brave and completely insane. Takes one to know one," she whispered. And then his eyes closed and he went limp in her arms, unconscious but breathing. Mrs. Graves knelt beside them. "He'll heal. Needs blood and darkness and time, but he'll heal." Elara looked down at the vampire in her arms, this ancient, deadly creature who'd fought a war at dawn to protect people he barely knew, and felt something shift in her chest. Fear, still. But underneath it, something warmer, something dangerous, something like trust. Chapter 5. Threads of care. They carried Lord Thorne to his chambers, a task made possible only because he roused enough to help himself down the stairs. His arm draped across Elara's shoulders, Mrs. Graves supporting his other side. Thomas ran ahead, clearing debris and opening doors, his young face set with determined focus. The vampire's rooms were as austere as they were elegant. Dark wood, minimal furnishing, heavy curtains already drawn against what remained of the afternoon sun. The bed dominated the space, black silk sheets over a frame that looked older than some countries. "Lay him down gently," Mrs. Graves instructed. "Thomas, fetch the medical kit from the kitchen. The one marked with the red cross, not the black one that's for humans." As Thomas ran off, Elara helped ease Lord Thorne onto the bed. Even unconscious, his face was tight with pain. The burns on his exposed skin had stopped smoking, but looked raw and angry. The gashes from Corvain claws were healing, but slowly for someone who was supposed to possess supernatural regeneration. Why isn't he healing faster? Elara asked, her hands hovering uselessly above his injuries. Sun damage interferes with vampire healing. And he's depleted, used too much blood magic, took too many wounds. Mrs. Graves was already unbuttoning his ruined shirt, revealing more burns, more cuts, bruises that looked black against his pale skin. He needs to feed, but he's too weak to hunt. So we'll have to bring sustenance to him. Elara's stomach clenched. You mean blood? I mean life, Mrs. Graves met her eyes steadily. Vampires don't just need blood, they need the vital essence in it. Willing blood, given with consent, heals better than anything else. Forces the body to regenerate, to repair. Will you? I'm too old. My blood would help, but not enough. He needs young blood, strong blood, Mrs. Graves's gaze turned, calculating. He needs someone who hasn't been bled before, whose system is full of vitality. Someone like you. The room tilted slightly. You want me to let him feed from me? I'm not asking you to save him. That choice is yours alone, Mrs. Graves's voice softened. But he's dying slowly, Miss Moss, and you're the only one here who can help. Elara stared down at Lord Thorne, at this creature who'd terrorized and protected her in equal measure, who'd burned himself fighting in daylight to keep her safe, who'd looked at her with those ancient silver eyes and seen something worth defending. Will it hurt? Not if done properly. Vampire venom contains an anesthetic. You'll feel pressure, perhaps a slight sting, then warmth. Some humans find it pleasant. Thomas burst back in with the medical kit. Mrs. Graves opened it, revealing vials of dark liquid, bandages, and instruments Elara couldn't identify. The older woman worked with practiced efficiency, cleaning wounds, applying something that made Lord Thorne twitch even in unconsciousness. It's not enough, Mrs. Graves said finally. His body is trying to heal, but it doesn't have the resources. He'll recover eventually, but it could take days. And if Corvain sends reinforcements before then, the unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. Elara took a deep breath. What do I need to do? Mrs. Graves's expression shifted, surprise, then respect. Sit beside him. Place your wrist near his mouth. His instincts will do the rest, even unconscious. But you must consent aloud, clearly. Vampire feeding binds through permission, not just proximity. Elara sat on the edge of the bed, her heart hammering. Lord Thorne looked younger in sleep, less like a Gothic painting and more like a man who was injured protecting her. She placed her wrists near his lips and said, voice steady despite her fear, I consent to Lord Thorne feeding from me for the purpose of healing. I give this freely. Nothing happened for a long moment. Then Lord Thorne's eyes opened, not all the way, just silver slits, unfocused and pained. Elara, he whispered, his voice barely audible. No, can't. You're under my protection. I don't feed from those I protect. You're dying. Better that than break my own rules. Your rules are going to get you killed. Elara leaned closer. I'm choosing this. My decision, my blood, my consent. You're not taking anything, I'm giving it. There's a difference. He stared at her, and she saw the war in his eyes, need versus honor, survival versus principle. Once I start, the venom makes you vulnerable, suggestible. What if I can't stop? Mrs. Graves is here. Thomas is here. And I think, Elara said softly, that you're the kind of person who's been stopping himself for 800 years. I trust you. Something cracked in his expression, surprise, pain, something that looked almost like grief. You shouldn't. Too late. His hand rose, trembling, to cradle her wrist. His thumb traced over her pulse point, and Elara shivered at the intimacy of it. Last chance to run, brave fool. Not running. Not anymore. Lord Thorne's fangs extended, delicate, sharp, terrifying, and fascinating in equal measure. He pulled her wrist to his mouth and bit down with surprising gentleness. The sting lasted only a second before warmth flooded through her, not just at the bite site, but radiating out through her entire body. It felt like sinking into a hot bath, like the moment before sleep when tension drains away. Mrs. Graves had been right. This was pleasant, almost dangerously so. She felt the pull as he drank, felt her blood flowing from her body into his, and with it something else. Images flickered at the edges of her consciousness, fragments of his memories bleeding into hers through the blood connection, a medieval village burning, a woman's face, kind and doomed, the taste of ashes and failure. Centuries of loneliness stretching out like an endless corridor. The weight of trying to change creatures that gloried in their monstrosity, and underneath it all, a bone-deep weariness, the exhaustion of someone who'd fought for too long with too little hope. Elara gasped. I can feel you. Lord Thorne's eyes met hers over her wrist, and she saw her own shock reflected there. This wasn't supposed to happen. Whatever was flowing between them was more than simple feeding, it was connection. Deep and unsettling, he pulled back from her wrist, fangs retracting, his tongue sealing the wounds with a thoroughness that made her shiver. Blood bond, he said hoarsely. We've formed a blood bond. That shouldn't be possible from one feeding. What does that mean? But Elara could already feel it, a thin thread connecting them, invisible but undeniable. She could sense his pain easing, could feel his strength returning, could almost hear his thoughts at the edges of her own mind. It means, Mrs. Graves said quietly, that you're connected now. Not completely, that would require multiple exchanges, but enough that you'll sense each other, feel each other's strong emotions, and neither of you will be able to lie to the other, not convincingly. Lord Thorne sat up slowly, color returning to his face, burns already fading. He looked at Elara with something between wonder and horror. This complicates everything. Story of my life lately, Elara muttered, but she didn't move away. The bond hummed between them like a plucked string. Thank you, he said, and his voice carried the weight of genuine gratitude. You saved my life. Again, you're making this a concerning pattern. You're welcome. Try not to make it necessary a third time. The corner of his mouth quirked up, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look less like a Gothic hero and more like someone who might have been human once, before the centuries buried that part of him. I'll do my best. Though, given House Corvain's commitment to my destruction, I can't make promises. He swung his legs off the bed, testing his strength. We have perhaps 12 hours before they regroup. The survivor will report back, and they'll come with reinforcements. We need to get you to the Night Court before they arrive. The Night Court will protect us? The Night Court operates under strict neutrality rules. Once you're within their halls as a registered witness, even Corvain can't touch you without facing collective punishment from all ruling houses. He stood, and though he swayed slightly, he stayed upright. But getting there will be dangerous. They'll have watchers on every approach. Then how do we do it? Lord Thorne's smile turned sharp, predatory. The same way I've survived 8 centuries of vampire politics. We cheat. Mrs. Graves cleared her throat. Before we plan anything, you need proper rest. 2 hours at least. Let the blood bond settle. Let Miss Moss recover from the feeding. I feel fine, Elara protested. But even as she said it, exhaustion washed over her. The warmth from the venom was fading, leaving behind bone-deep tiredness. You will not feel fine in approximately 10 minutes, Mrs. Graves said firmly. You've just donated enough blood to save a dying vampire. Your body needs rest. Lord Thorne, your room's or hers? Mine has better wards. He looked at Elara. Will you trust me enough to sleep in a vampire's bed? I promise I'll be the perfect gentleman. Mostly because I'll be studying maps and planning our route. Elara wanted to argue. Wanted to insist she was fine, that she didn't need rest, that sleeping in Lord Thorne's bed crossed some line she couldn't quite define. But the exhaustion was pulling at her like a tide, and the blood bond hummed with his genuine concern for her well-being. Fine, she said. But if you watch me sleep, I'm filing a complaint with the Night Court. Noted. He helped her settle against the pillows, silk and expensive and smelling of cedar and something uniquely him. Sleep, Elara Moss. When you wake, we plan your survival. She wanted to stay awake, wanted to watch him work, to understand this world she'd been dragged into. But her eyes were already closing, the bond, a warm presence at the back of her mind. And the last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Lord Thorne at his desk, silver eyes focused on maps and documents, planning a war with the same intensity he'd used to protect her. Safe, her exhausted mind whispered. You're safe, and impossibly she believed it. Chapter 6. The lore of ancient houses. Elara woke to candlelight, and the sound of Lord Thorne's voice, low and measured, speaking words in a language she didn't recognize. Her eyes adjusted slowly, finding him still at his desk. Now dressed in fresh clothes, black shirt, dark trousers. Looking every inch the Gothic lord his title suggested, the blood bond stirred. And with it came awareness of his emotional state, focused, determined, and underneath it all, a current of worry he was trying to suppress. You're awake, he said, without turning around. I can feel it through the bond. Your consciousness ripples differently than sleep. Elara sat up, testing her body. The exhaustion had faded, replaced by a strange vitality, as if the act of feeding him had somehow strengthened her as well. How long was I asleep? 3 hours. Longer than I'd hoped. But you needed it. He finally turned to face her, and she saw that his injuries had completely healed. No burns, no cuts, no bruises. Just perfect, unmarred skin and those unsettling silver eyes. We need to talk before we leave. There are things you must understand about the world you're entering, the night court, and the houses that comprise it. The politics, the laws, the 1,000 unspoken rules that can get you killed if you violate them. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Come, consider this your crash course in vampire society. Elara joined him, noting the maps and documents spread across the desk's surface. She recognized a street map of London, but marked with symbols and notations that made no sense to her. Circles in red, crosses in black, entire sections shaded in different colors. The night court convenes in London, Lord Thorne began, in a place humans call the Old Treasury Building. It's been ours since 1694, though mortals believe it's simply an abandoned government building. 7 houses hold court seats, each representing a different philosophy of vampire existence. He pointed to 7 circles marked on the map, each in a different color. House Thorne, my house believes in the Concord, in rules that protect both vampires and humans. We feed with consent, we police our own. We maintain the masquerade that keeps us hidden from mortal awareness. His finger moved to a blue circle. House Sterling shares our philosophy but focuses more on integration, vampires living among humans in professional society, contributing to mortal civilization rather than feeding off it. They sound reasonable, Elara said. They are. Which is why the other houses consider us both soft. He indicated a green circle. House Vesper takes a middle position. They follow the Concord but interpret it loosely. They believe in vampire superiority, but tempered with pragmatism. Live and let live. So long as humans know their place. His expression darkened as he moved to a red circle. House Corvain, you've met. They believe vampires are apex predators and humans are livestock. They push every boundary, exploit every loophole, and view the Concord as an inconvenient obstacle to their natural dominance. How do they keep their court seat if they're so terrible? Because they're powerful, ancient, and technically operate within legal boundaries. Until last night, Lord Thorne's jaw tightened. Feeding on a child without consent, taking collateral without trial, those are capital violations. I can bring evidence before the court that will strip them of their seat, possibly even disband the house entirely, which is why they're trying to kill me. Yes, your testimony as an uninvolved human witness carries more weight than any vampire's account. We're not exactly known for our objectivity where rival houses are concerned. He moved to a purple circle. House Knox deals in information and secrets. They're neutral to a fault. They'll sell intelligence to any house willing to pay. Slippery and untrustworthy, but they keep the other houses from achieving total dominance. A black circle. House Morrow believes vampires should embrace their monstrous nature. They're barely civilized, barely tolerated, kept in check only by their relative weakness compared to the other houses. They vote with Corvin on most issues. Finally, a silver circle. And House Ashencourt, the oldest of us all. They remember the time before the Concord, before vampire society had any rules. They're traditional, conservative, and utterly obsessed with bloodline purity. They don't approve of my methods, but they respect law and tradition. If we can convince them that Corvin violated ancient precedent, they'll vote for dissolution. Elara absorbed this, her mind, organizing the information like a complex archive system. So we need 4 votes minimum to strip Corvin's seat. You, Sterling, and Ashencourt makes 3. Who's the 4th? Vesper. If we present the case correctly. They're pragmatists. They'll vote against Corvin if it serves their interests. Lord Thorne leaned back, studying her. But first we need to get you to court alive. And there are rules you must follow once we're inside. I'm listening. First, never look a vampire directly in the eyes unless invited. Eye contact between vampire and human can trigger a dominance response, even unintentionally. The older vampires interpret it as challenge or invitation, neither of which you want. Elara blinked. But I've been looking at your eyes this entire time. Your blood bonded to me. The rules are different between us now. I couldn't compel you even if I tried, and you have implicit permission to meet my gaze. Something flickered in his expression. Though I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. Unsettling. You see too much. The bond thrummed with the truth of it. She could see past his careful control to the vulnerability underneath the loneliness. The weight of centuries, the fear that he might fail to protect her. Second, he continued. Speak only when addressed directly. The court operates under formal protocols. Humans are permitted as witnesses, but they're expected to show deference. Don't volunteer information, don't interrupt. And for God's sake, don't argue with the judges. What if they ask me something I can't answer? Say, I cannot speak to that, my lord. It's the formal way of declining without giving offense. He pulled out a sheet of parchment covered in elegant script. Third, these are the oaths you'll be required to swear. Memorize them. The Night Court takes words very seriously. Vampire law is built on binding contracts and spoken vows. Elara scanned the document. The language was archaic, formal, but clear in its intent. She would swear to tell truth, to withhold nothing relevant to the case, to submit to court authority while within their halls. What happens if I break these oaths? Best case? They eject you from court and your testimony becomes inadmissible. Worst case? Lord Thorne's expression was grim. Vampire justice is swift and final. They'd execute you on the spot. Her throat went dry. No pressure then. I won't let it come to that. His hand covered hers on the desk, cool fingers wrapping around her warmer ones. You'll be under my protection the entire time. Any vampire who touches you without cause answers to me in formal combat. It's an old law, rarely invoked anymore, but still binding. You'd fight for me? Again? I'd burn in daylight for you again, Elara. Fighting in a court chamber is considerably less dramatic. His thumb traced over her knuckles absently. The blood bond makes you precious to me in ways I don't fully understand yet. But beyond that, you're brave and clever and you see the world clearly. Those qualities are rare, worth protecting. The bond flared with his sincerity, and Elara felt heat rise in her cheeks. You barely know me. I know you stopped for a crying child. I know you knelt in the rain to save a stranger. I know you ran toward danger instead of away from it when Mrs. Graves needed help. His silver eyes held hers. I've known vampires for centuries who possess less courage than you showed in a single night. So yes, I'd fight for you. Gladly. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Elara didn't want to name. The blood bond hummed, carrying emotions she couldn't fully parse. His respect, her growing trust, and underneath it all, the dangerous spark of something deeper. A knock at the door broke the tension. Mrs. Graves entered, carrying clothes draped over her arm. Court attire for Miss Moss. Simple, formal, nothing that will draw unwanted attention. The outfit was beautiful, a deep gray dress with long sleeves and a high collar, Victorian in style but modern in cut. Practical boots. A cloak that looked both warm and elegant. Get dressed, Lord Thorne said, standing. We leave in 20 minutes. The court convenes at midnight, and we need to arrive early to register your testimony. What about Thomas and Lissa? They'll stay here with Mrs. Graves. Thornhaven's inner wards held even when the outer ones failed. They'll be safe until this is resolved. He moved toward the door, then paused. Elara, the Night Court is going to try to unsettle you. They'll test you, probe for weakness, try to discredit your testimony. Don't let them. You've faced worse in the last 24 hours than most humans see in a lifetime. Have I though? Elara looked at him, this ancient, beautiful creature who'd somehow become her strange protector. Because I feel like the really scary part is just beginning. Lord Thorne's smile was sharp and sad. You're not wrong. But we face it together. Blood bonded, witness and protector, human and vampire against houses that would see us both destroyed. He opened the door. 20 minutes. Then we walk into the lion's den and dare them to bite. After he left, Elara changed into the court attire, her hands shaking slightly as she fastened the buttons. Through the blood bond, she felt Lord Thorne preparing in another room, checking weapons she couldn't see, reviewing arguments she couldn't hear. Steeling himself for political battles that had been fought for centuries before she was born, and underneath his focus, she felt his worry. Not for himself, but for her. The human woman who'd stumbled into his world and refused to run, the brave fool he'd called her. With something that sounded almost like affection, Elara looked at herself in the mirror, at this version of herself dressed for a vampire court. About to testify against monsters, protected by a creature who should terrify her, but instead made her feel safer than she had in months. What have you gotten yourself into? She whispered to her reflection, The reflection had no answers, but through the blood bond, she felt Lord Thorne's presence, steady and certain. And somehow that was enough, for now. Chapter 7. The Night Court Recess. The journey to London happened in shadow. Lord Thorne led Elara through Thornhaven's depths to a chamber she hadn't known existed, a circular room carved entirely from black stone, its walls inscribed with symbols that seemed to writhe in the candlelight. At its center, a silver circle was etched into the floor, pulsing with faint luminescence. Shadow Gate, Lord Thorne explained, seeing her hesitation. Ancient vampire magic, powered by blood and will. It's faster than any mortal conveyance, and leaves no trail for Corvain to follow. Like how you brought us here from the alley? Similar, but more controlled. Less disorienting. He offered his hand. Stay close to me. The void between spaces can be unsettling for those not accustomed to it. Elara took his hand, feeling the coolness of his skin against hers, the immediate warmth of the blood bond flaring at the contact. He pulled her into the silver circle, wrapped an arm around her waist, and spoke 3 words in that ancient language she didn't understand. The world dissolved, this time. Elara kept her eyes open despite every instinct screaming at her to close them. She saw the in-between, the space that shouldn't exist, filled with shadows that moved with purpose and intent. She felt them brush against her consciousness, curious and hungry, testing the blood bond that marked her as claimed. Lord Thorne's arm tightened around her. Don't look at them directly. Don't acknowledge them. They're residual consciousnesses of vampires who died using the gates trapped between spaces, neither alive nor truly destroyed. That's horrifying. Yes, his voice was grim. It's why most vampires prefer conventional travel. But we don't have time for caution. The shadows pressed closer, and Elara heard whispers in languages she couldn't identify. Pleas, threats, offers of power, and promises of destruction. One shadow resolved into something almost human-shaped, reaching for her with hands made of smoke and longing. Mine, Lord Thorne said, his voice dropping into that inhuman register that made her bones vibrate. She is blood-bonded and claimed. Touch her and face obliteration. The shadows recoiled. The whispers faded. And then reality snapped back into focus with a force that made Elara's ears pop. They stood in an alley behind a massive Georgian building, its windows dark, its stones ancient and imposing. The air smelled of Thames water and old secrets. Welcome to the old treasury, Lord Thorne said, releasing her carefully. And the seat of the night court. Are you steady? Elara tested her legs. No dizziness this time, just a bone-deep chill that the November air didn't explain. I'm fine. Those things in the void, are you in danger of becoming one of them? If I die while using a shadow gate, yes. It's a risk all vampires accept. He adjusted his coat, black wool over black silk, formal and severe. But I don't plan on dying tonight. Too much at stake. They moved through the alley to a side entrance marked with the same Concord symbols Elara had seen throughout Thornhaven. Lord Thorne pressed his palm to the door, and it swung open silently, revealing a corridor lit by gas lamps that surely violated modern building codes. Stay behind me, he murmured. Don't speak unless directly addressed. And remember, eyes down unless you're speaking to me. The corridor opened into a vast entrance hall that stole Elara's breath. It was circular, rising 3 stories to a domed ceiling painted with scenes of vampire history, battles and coronations, feeding rituals and executions, all rendered in exquisite and disturbing detail. 7 doors ringed the hall, each marked with a house symbol in precious metals. Vampires filled the space, dozens of them, beautiful and terrible, dressed in everything from medieval finery to modern suits. They moved with that unnatural grace, conversed in low voices. Watched the entrance with predatory interest as Lord Thorne and Elara entered. The whispers started immediately. Thorne brought a human, blood-bonded. Look at the resonance between them. Is that his witness? She's so young. Corvain won't let this stand. There'll be blood before dawn. Lord Thorne ignored them all, moving through the crowd with the confidence of someone who'd walked these halls for centuries. Elara kept her eyes down as instructed, but through the blood bond, she felt his awareness tracking threats, noting allies, calculating odds with the precision of an ancient strategist. They approached a desk where a vampire woman sat, her silver hair piled high, her expression carved from ice. Lord Thorne, we received word of your petition. House Corvain has filed a counterclaim. Naturally. Lord Thorne's tone was dry. I need to register my witness and request a formal hearing before the full court. The woman's gaze flicked to Elara, and even without meeting her eyes directly, Elara felt the weight of that attention. A human witness. How novel. Name and consent status? Elara Moss. She consents to testify and has sworn the preliminary oaths. Blood bond status? Established. Single feeding, mutual consent, protection-based. The woman made notes in a ledger that looked older than nations. The court will convene in 1 hour. Your witness will be placed in holding until called. You may observe from the House Thorne gallery. Standard protocols apply. I want her in my sight at all times, Lord Thorne said, his voice sharpening. Corvain has already attempted to kill her twice. I invoke traditional protection rights. The woman's eyebrow rose. You're claiming formal guardianship? That requires, I'm aware of what it requires. I claim her as ward under the Concord of 1642, Articles 7 and 12. Any vampire who harms her faces me in single combat. Any house that shelters her attacker faces dissolution. Those are the terms. Silence rippled outward from the desk. Other vampires turned to stare, their whispers intensifying. That's an archaic protection, the woman said. It hasn't been invoked into centuries, then everyone's due for a reminder of how vampire law actually works. Lord Thorne placed a formal document on the desk. When had he prepared that? Covered in elegant script and sealed with red wax. My petition, properly filed. Will the court hear it, or shall I invoke my right to trial by combat instead? The woman's lips thinned. The court will hear it. But Lord Thorne, you're making powerful enemies. House Corvain has allies. If you lose this petition, they'll come for you with everything they have. Let them. His hand found Elara's lower back, a protective gesture that sent warmth through the blood bond. My witness and I will be in the antechamber. Summon us when the court is ready. He guided Elara away from the desk toward a smaller door, and she felt the eyes following them. Dozens of predators watching prey walk past. Held back only by the formal protections Lord Thorne had just invoked, the antechamber was smaller, quieter, with high-backed chairs and more of that unsettling historical artwork. Lord Thorne checked the room thoroughly before letting Elara sit, his movements tense with controlled aggression. That went well, Elara said, hearing the tremor in her own voice. That went terribly. Lord Thorne paced the small space like a caged wolf. Half the court now knows I've blood-bonded a human witness and claimed formal guardianship. Corvain will use it to argue bias. The other houses will question my judgment. And every vampire in that hall is now calculating how to use you against me. I'm sorry, don't. He stopped pacing, turning to face her. You have nothing to apologize for. I knew the risks when I offered you protection. I'd make the same choice again. His jaw tightened. But this is going to be harder than I anticipated. Corvain has had time to prepare counter-arguments, to call in favors, to position allies. We're walking into a political ambush. Through the blood bond, Elara felt his worry crystallize into something sharper: fear. Not for himself, but for her. For what the court might do if his petition failed. What happens if we lose? She asked quietly. Lord Thorne was silent for a long moment. If the court rules against us, Corvain goes free. Thomas and Lys's family remains in bondage. And you? He met her eyes directly, and she saw the truth in his. You become a loose end that Corvain will eliminate the moment you leave court protection. They can't risk you taking your testimony elsewhere, to human authorities or media, so I die either way? Not while I'm breathing. He crossed to her, taking both her hands in his. Listen to me. When you testify, tell the truth simply and clearly. Don't embellish. Don't guess at things you didn't directly witness. The court respects precision over passion. What if they ask about you? About the blood bond? Tell them exactly what happened. I was injured. You offered your blood to save my life. The bond formed unexpectedly. They can't fault you for choosing to save someone, even a vampire. His thumbs traced over her knuckles. And if Corvain's lawyers try to intimidate you, look at me. Use the bond. I'll steady you. You really think we can win this? I think we have truth on our side, which matters to some of the houses. I think Corvain overplayed their hand by attacking Thornhaven. And I think, he said softly, that you're braver than you realize. You've faced vampires in alleys and dawn raids and shadow gates. A courtroom full of immortal politicians is just another type of monster. Despite everything, Elara almost smiled. When you put it that way, it sounds insane. Yes. He released her hands, but stayed close. But insanity seems to be our specialty lately. A bell tolled somewhere in the building, deep, resonant, carrying through stone and flesh alike. Lord Thorne straightened, his expression shifting from concerned protector to court strategist. That's the summoning bell. The night court is convening. He offered his arm formally. Ready to walk into history, Elara Moss? Elara took his arm, feeling the blood bond hum between them, carrying his confidence and her courage in equal measure. Ready as I'll ever be. Good enough. He led her to the door. Remember, eyes down, speak truthfully, and don't let them see you fear them. You've survived worse. Have I? You're about to find out. The door opened onto a corridor lined with vampires, all watching, all waiting to see the human who dared to challenge a ruling house. And at the end of that corridor, light spilled from the court chamber, cold and white and unforgiving as judgment itself. Elara lifted her chin and walked forward. Blood bonded to a vampire king, carrying testimony that could topple empires. The real battle was about to begin. Chapter 8. Testimony in Treachery. Night court chamber was designed to intimidate. 7 thrones rose on a dais at the far end, each carved from different stone and adorned with house symbols. The room stretched impossibly high, its ceiling lost in shadow, despite the chandeliers burning with cold white light. Galleries ringed the upper levels where lesser vampires watched, their eyes glinting like stars in darkness, and in the center of it all stood a single chair, plain wood, unadorned, positioned directly before the 7 judges, like an offering on an altar. The witness stand. Lord Thorne guided Elara to a bench near the front, in a section marked with the thorn crest. Other vampires sat nearby, his house members, she assumed, all watching her with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. I'll be right here, he murmured, too low for others to hear. Every moment. Use the bond if you need strength. Then he released her and moved to take his position in the petitioner's box, a raised platform to the left of the witness stand. Across from him, in an identical box on the right, stood 3 vampires in blood-red suits, House Corvain's representatives. The vampire in the center was tall and angular, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. His eyes were the color of old blood, and when they found Elara, she felt the weight of his hatred like a physical blow. All rise for the night court. A voice boomed. Everyone stood. The 7 judges entered from behind their thrones, moving with synchronized grace that suggested centuries of ritual. They took their seats, and the court crier continued. Presiding, Lord Thorne, of House Thorne. Lady Sterling of House Sterling, Lord Vesper of House Vesper, Lord Morrow of House Morrow, Lady Knox of House Knox, Lord Aschencourt of House Aschencourt, and Lord Corvain of House Corvain. Let all present bear witness to the judgment of immortals. Elara's stomach dropped. Lord Corvain is one of the judges? She whispered to the vampire beside her, a young woman with kind eyes. House heads always sit in judgment on matters involving their house. The woman whispered back. He can vote, but his vote alone cannot prevent dissolution if the other 6 houses agree. It's meant to ensure fairness, though. She trailed off meaningfully. Though it rarely works that way, Elara finished. The woman's smile was grim. You learn quickly. Lord Aschencourt, ancient even by vampire standards, his hair white as snow, spoke first. Lord Thorne of House Thorne has petitioned for the dissolution of House Corvain, citing violations of Articles 3, 7, and 12 of the Concord of 1642. Lord Corvain has filed counter-charges of unlawful interference and false witness. We shall hear evidence from both parties. His gaze swept the chamber. Let it be known that we judge based on law, not alliance. Let truth guide our verdict. Truth, the other judges echoed. Though Lord Corvain's voice carried ironic emphasis. Lord Thorne, present your evidence. Lord Thorne stood, and every eye in the chamber fixed on him. I present testimony of events witnessed on the night of November 15th. A human child, Thomas Ashford, invoked the Concord of 1642, calling for aid under the blood oath his grandfather established with House Thorne. I answered that call and found his sister, Melissa Ashford, age 17, dying from wounds consistent with vampire feeding. She bore puncture wounds, had lost dangerous amounts of blood, and was in clear violation of the sanctuary laws, fed upon without consent, left to die in a public place, taken as collateral without trial or court approval. Hearsay, the Corvain representative called out. Lord Thorne arrived after the alleged attack. He cannot testify to what he did not witness, which is why I bring a witness who did. Lord Thorne gestured toward Elara Moss, human archivist, with no prior connection to any vampire house. She discovered the children before my Arrival and witness the attack's aftermath. Firsthand, all eyes turned to Elara. She felt the weight of their attention like pressure against her skin, made worse by the blood bond carrying Lord Thorne's controlled tension. Bring the witness forward, Lord Agincourt commanded. Elara stood on shaking legs and walked to the witness chair. The walk felt endless, every step carrying her closer to the 7 immortals who held her fate in their hands. She sat carefully, keeping her eyes down as instructed, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. State your name for the record, Lord Agincourt said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Elara Moss. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. And you swear to speak truth before this court, knowing that falsehood carries penalty of death? I swear it. The words felt heavy, binding, as if the room itself was listening. Tell us what you witnessed. Elara took a breath and began. She described hearing Thomas's cries, finding Melissa collapsed and barely breathing, seeing the puncture wounds on her neck. She spoke clearly, precisely, sticking to facts as Lord Thorne had instructed. And you saw no vampire near the girl? Lady Sterling asked, her voice sharp with intelligence. No, my lady. Only the children. Then you cannot testify that House Corvain was responsible, the Corvain representative said smoothly. You witnessed an injured girl. Nothing more. I witnessed a 17-year-old dying from vampire feeding in a public alley, her blood still fresh around wounds that could only have been made minutes before. Elara kept her voice level. The child said House Corvain's debt collectors had taken her, that they fed on her and left her to die. The testimony of a frightened child, Lord Corvain himself said, leaning forward on his throne. Children imagine monsters and shadows. It proves nothing. Then explain the wounds, Lord Thorne cut in. Explain why Melissa Ashford bore feeding marks consistent with multiple vampires. Explain why Thomas possessed an emergency summoning device linked to my house, a device only issued to families under debt protection, which the Ashford family established 3 generations ago specifically to escape predatory contracts. The Ashford family's debt to House Corvain is legitimate, the representative countered. Established 5 years ago, when the father borrowed money for medical expenses. The contract was signed willingly, witnessed, and filed with this court. We have every right to collect. By feeding on children? Lord Thorne's voice sharpened. The concord is explicit. Minors cannot be used as collateral, cannot be fed upon, cannot be taken without parental consent and court approval. You violated all 3 provisions. We violated nothing. The girl came willingly. She was 17. The words burst from Elara before she could stop them. Every vampire in the chamber turned to stare. She was a child, terrified, dying in an alley because your house treated her like livestock. And you're standing here arguing legalities like her life doesn't matter. Silence. Lord Corvain's voice cracked like a whip. The witness will confine herself to facts, not emotional outbursts. But Lord Agincourt raised a hand. Let her speak. Human perspective has value in cases involving human victims. His ancient eyes found Elara. Continue, Miss Moss, but control yourself. Elara's hands clenched in her lap. Through the bond, she felt Lord Thorne's pride mixed with concern. I found a dying girl and a terrified boy. I heard his desperate plea for help. And I watched Lord Thorne save her life while your house's vampires hunted us through the rain. If that's legal, then your laws are meaningless. The chamber erupted in whispers. Several judges leaned together, conferring in voices too low for Elara to hear. Lady Knox spoke next, her voice carrying subtle amusement. The witness is blood bonded to Lord Thorne. Does this not compromise her testimony? The bond formed after the events in question, Lord Thorne said, and only because I required healing after Corvain vampires attacked my residence in broad daylight, attempting to kill the very witnesses you're now questioning. Miss Moss offered her blood to save my life. The bond was an unexpected consequence, not a calculated manipulation. How convenient, Lord Corvain drawled. You blood bond your witness, claim formal guardianship, and expect us to believe there's no coercion involved? I expect you to follow the law you're so fond of citing, Lord Thorne shot back. Blood bonds require mutual consent. They cannot form under compulsion. The court's own scholars have established this repeatedly. Miss Moss chose to save my life, just as she chose to help the Ashford children. Her capacity for choice is not in question. Then let us test it. Lord Corvain's smile was cruel. Miss Moss, look at me. Elara's head jerked up before she could stop herself, meeting those blood-red eyes. Power crashed into her old, vicious, probing for weakness. She felt him trying to slip into her mind, to compel her, to force false testimony from her lips, but the blood bond flared like a shield, and Lord Thorne's presence flooded through their connection, steadying her, strengthening her. "Tell the court," Lord Corvain commanded, his power pressing harder, "that you orchestrated this entire situation to entrap House Corvain, that you're working with Lord Thorne to destroy us." Elara felt her mouth trying to form the words, felt the compulsion wrapping around her wool like chains. But underneath it, Lord Thorne's voice echoed through the bond. "You are stronger than his compulsion. You are mine to protect, not his to control. Fight him." "No," Elara said, and the word came out clear and defiant. "I stumbled into your world by accident. I'm here because your house tried to kill children, and no amount of compulsion will make me lie about that." The chamber went deadly silent. Lord Corvain's face contorted with rage. "She resists compulsion. She's been trained, prepared, corrupted by House Thorne's manipulation. She resists because she's blood bonded to me," Lord Thorne said coldly. "And blood bonds supersede house compulsion. It's basic vampire law, which you'd know if you spent less time exploiting loopholes and more time actually reading the concord you claim to follow." Lord Agincourt's expression had shifted from neutral to genuinely disturbed. "Lord Corvain, you attempted to compel a registered witness during active testimony. That is a violation of court protocol." "I was testing her veracity. You were attempting to manufacture false evidence," Lady Sterling interrupted, her voice sharp. "We all felt your compulsion. We all witnessed it fail. Which means Miss Moss is either telling the truth, or she's the most sophisticated plant in court history. And given that she had no prior connection to any vampire house, the latter seems unlikely." Lord Vesper nodded slowly. "I'm inclined to believe the witness. The evidence suggests House Corvain acted improperly, then attempted to silence witnesses through violence and compulsion. This is absurd." The Corvain representative shouted. "You're taking the word of a human over a ruling house?" "We're following the evidence," Lord Agincourt said quietly. "Which is damning, Lord Corvain. Very damning indeed." Lord Corvain stood from his throne, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with his fury. "If this court moves to dissolve House Corvain, we will not go quietly. We have allies, we have power, and we will drag every house in this chamber down with us." "Is that a threat?" Lord Thorne asked softly. "It's a promise." The night court had just turned into a powder keg, and Elara sat in the center of it, blood bonded to a vampire king. Having justified a househead's compulsion, she'd either save them all or doomed them completely, through the bond. Lord Thorne's voice came clear and certain. "You were magnificent. Now hold on. This is about to get worse." Chapter 9. The price of justice. The chamber descended into chaos. Vampires in the galleries shouted over each other, some demanding immediate dissolution of House Corvain, others calling for the petition to be dismissed. Lord Corvain remained standing, his fury palpable, while his representatives scrambled to control the damage. Lord Agincourt struck his gavel 3 times, the sound echoing like gunshots. "Order. This court will have order." The noise subsided to angry whispers. Elara remained frozen in the witness chair, her heart pounding, acutely aware that she'd just publicly humiliated one of the most powerful vampires in existence. Through the blood bond, she felt Lord Thorne's protective instincts coiling tight, ready to strike if anyone moved against her. "Miss Moss may step down," Lord Agincourt said. "We've heard sufficient testimony." Elara stood on unsteady legs and returned to her seat beside Lord Thorne. He didn't touch her, to many eyes watching, but the bond carried his reassurance like a steady hand at her back. "The court will now deliberate," Lord Agincourt continued. "Lord Corvain, you will abstain from voting on your own house's dissolution, per court protocol. The remaining 6 judges will decide." Lord Corvain's smile was razor sharp. "By all means, judge us. But remember, House Corvain controls significant territory, numerous contracts, and alliances that span centuries. Dissolving us creates a power vacuum that will tear vampire society apart." "Is that truly what you want?" "What we want," Lady Sterling said coldly, "is adherence to the laws that keep us civilized." "You fed on a child, Lord Corvain. You attempted to murder witnesses. You just tried to compel false testimony in open court. These aren't minor infractions, they're fundamental violations of everything the Concord stands for. Prove." "The feeding happened," the Corvain representative demanded. "You have testimony from a frightened child and a human who arrived after the fact." "No vampire witnesses." No physical evidence beyond wounds that could have come from anywhere. We have Melissa Ashford herself, Lord Thorne said. Bring her before the court. Let her testify to what happened. The girl is recovering from trauma, the representative countered. Her testimony would be unreliable at best, coerced at worst. She's been sheltering at Thornhaven, completely under Lord Thorne's influence enough. Lord Agincourt's voice cut through the argument. We judge based on the evidence presented. Miss Moss's testimony is credible. Lord Corvain's attempt to compel her is documented. The attack on Thornhaven is witnessed by multiple parties. The pattern of behavior suggests House Corvain has been operating outside acceptable boundaries for some time. He looked to the other judges. I vote for dissolution. House Corvain has violated the Concord's core principles. Their seat should be forfeit, their contracts reviewed, their territory redistributed. Lady Sterling nodded immediately. I concur. Dissolution. Lord Vesper hesitated, his expression calculating. Dissolution is extreme. Perhaps censure, probationary status, mandatory oversight. They tried to kill children, Lady Sterling said flatly. How is that not grounds for dissolution? Because dissolving a house has consequences. Lord Morrow spoke for the first time, his voice rough and ancient. Corvain's contracts involve hundreds of families. Their territory borders 3 other houses. Dissolution means war over the scraps. Then we accept that cost, Lord Thorne said, standing in his box. Because the alternative is confirming that houses can violate any law they please so long as they're powerful enough. What message does that send? What future does that create? Lord Morrow's eyes black as pitch fixed on Lord Thorne. You speak of principles, but you've blood-bonded a human witness, claimed archaic protection rights, and brought this petition knowing it would destabilize the court. Don't pretend your hands are clean, Thorne. I never claimed they were. But I didn't feed on children. I didn't attempt to murder witnesses. And I didn't try to compel false testimony before the assembled court. Lord Thorne's voice hardened. If we're comparing sins, mine are considerably smaller. 4 votes needed for dissolution, Lady Knox said, her voice carrying that perpetual amusement. We have 2 confirmed, Agincourt and Sterling. Lord Vesper is wavering. Lord Morrow opposes. Which leaves me. She smiled. How interesting to be the deciding vote. The chamber held its breath. Lady Knox studied Lord Corvain with eyes that seemed to see through flesh to secrets beneath. House Knox trades in information. We know things others don't. And I know that House Corvain has been systematically acquiring contracts from vulnerable families, exploiting legal loopholes to create what amounts to indentured servitude. She paused. I also know they've been sharing intelligence with mortal hunting organizations, preparing for the day when they can manufacture a crisis that forces vampire society into open war with humanity. Shocked whispers rippled through the galleries. Lord Corvain's face went pale. That's a lie, he hissed. You have no proof. I have 6 months of intercepted correspondence. Names, dates, payments, plans. Lady Knox's smile sharpened. I was saving it for when the information became valuable. Congratulations, Lord Corvain. That day is today. She turned to the other judges. I vote for dissolution. Not because of the children, though, that's reason enough, but because House Corvain is actively working to destroy the masquerade that protects us all. They're not just violating the Concord. They're betraying our entire species. The chamber erupted again. Vampires surged to their feet, shouting accusations and defenses. Lord Corvain's representatives tried to speak over the chaos, denying everything, but no one was listening anymore. Lord Agincourt's gavel struck repeatedly. Order. Court is still in session. Finally, silence fell tense and brittle as cracked glass. We have 3 votes for dissolution, Lord Agincourt said. Lord Vesper. The decision falls to you. All eyes turned to Lord Vesper, pragmatic, calculating. The vampire who'd spent centuries building a reputation for choosing the winning side of every conflict. He stood slowly. House Corvain's actions cannot be defended. Their violations are clear. Their threat to vampire society is documented. He paused, his expression troubled. But Lord Morrow is right about one thing: dissolution will create instability. So I propose a compromise. There is no compromise with treason, Lady Sterling snapped. Perhaps not. But there is strategy. Lord Vesper looked directly at Lord Corvain. I vote for dissolution on the condition that House Corvain's territories and contracts are not redistributed immediately. Instead, they fall under court stewardship for a period of 20 years, managed by a coalition of the remaining houses. This prevents war, protects the families currently under Corvain contracts, and removes Corvain's power without creating a vacuum. Lord Agincourt considered this a managed dissolution, unprecedented, but not without merit. He looked to the other judges. Those in favor? Lady Stirling nodded reluctantly. Lady Knox shrugged. Lord Morrow, after a long moment, grunted agreement. Then it is decided. Lord Agincourt turned to Lord Corvain, whose face had gone from pale to murderous. House Corvain is hereby dissolved. Your seat on this court is forfeit. Your territories will be managed by coalition stewardship. Your personal holdings are subject to review. And you, Lord Corvain, are stripped of your title and authority, effective immediately. You'll regret this, Lord Corvain said, his voice low and venomous. All of you. I won't forget who voted against me. And when the chaos comes, when humans discover what we are and vampire society burns, remember that I warned you. Your warnings are noted and disregarded. Lord Agincourt struck his gavel a final time. Court is adjourned. Former Lord Corvain, you have 24 hours to vacate court grounds before you're removed by force. Lord Corvain stared at the assembled judges with naked hatred. Then his eyes found Elara, and the promise in them was clear. This isn't over. He swept from the chamber, his representatives scrambling after him. Leaving whispers and speculation in his wake, Lord Thorne immediately moved to Elara's side. We need to leave, now. Corvain is unpredictable when cornered, and he has nothing left to lose. Will he try something here? In court? No, too many witnesses, too much scrutiny. But the moment we're outside these walls, Lord Thorne's jaw tightened. Mrs. Graves has already secured the children. We'll use the Shadow Gate to return to Thornhaven, regroup, and plan our next move. Next move? Elara looked at him incredulously. We won. Corvain is dissolved. Isn't it over? The look Lord Thorne gave her was grim. It's never over, Elara. We've made an enemy who has centuries of resources, nothing left to lose, and a personal vendetta against everyone who brought him down. Especially you. Through the bond, she felt his fear crystallize into certainty they'd won the battle. But the war was just beginning. Other vampires approached, offering congratulations to Lord Thorne, expressing admiration for Elara's courage, asking what House Thorne planned to do with Corvain's former territories. Lord Thorne handled them all with practiced diplomacy, but his focus never left Elara, his protective instincts thrumming through the bond. Finally, they extracted themselves from the crowd and made their way to the exit. The corridor outside was nearly empty, most vampires still inside discussing the historic verdict. The Shadow Gate is this way, Lord Thorne said, guiding her toward a side passage. 5 minutes and we'll be back at Thornhaven. You can rest, process everything. A scream cut through the air. Not a vampire scream. Human, young, terrified. Thomas, Lord Thorne's expression went from protective to lethal in an instant. That came from the holding chambers, where Mrs. Graves was supposed to be keeping the children safe. They ran, the blood bond, singing with shared urgency and rising dread. The holding chambers were through 2 corridors and down a flight of stairs. Elara's lungs burned by the time they reached the heavy door. Lord Thorne tore it open. Inside, Mrs. Graves lay crumpled against the wall, blood trickling from a head wound. Thomas huddled over his sister, who was unconscious again, her skin pale, fresh bite marks on her neck, and standing in the center of the room, smiling, with blood on his lips, was a vampire Elara recognized from the court chamber, one of Corvain's representatives. Lord Thorne, the vampire said pleasantly. So predictable. We knew you'd come running the moment the children screamed. He gestured to Lys's unconscious form. Consider this a message from Lord Corvain. Your victory today was Pyrrhic. We've already won tomorrow. Lord Thorne moved like lightning, but the vampire was ready. He threw something, a glass vial that shattered at Lord Thorne's feet, releasing gas that made the vampire stumble, his movements suddenly sluggish. Nightshade extract, the Corvain vampire explained. Nasty stuff for your kind. And while you're incapacitated, we'll be taking your precious witnesses. Lord Corvain has plans for them, particularly Miss Moss. He turned to Elara, his smile widening. Come along, human. Time to learn what happens to those who challenge gods. Elara looked at Lord Thorne struggling against the poison, at Mrs. Graves, injured, at Thomas crying over his sister, and made a choice. She grabbed the nearest weapon, a heavy candlestick from a wall sconce, and swung it with all her strength at the vampire's head. Chapter 10. A new dawnth candlestick connected with a satisfying crack. The Corvain vampire staggered, more surprised than hurt, but it gave Elara the seconds she needed. She threw herself between him and Thomas, the blood bond screaming with Lord Thorne's desperation and rage as he fought against the nightshade poisoning his system. "You've got courage. I'll give you that," the vampire said, touching his split cheek, where blood welled dark. "But courage doesn't stop Fang's human." He lunged. Elara swung again, but this time he caught the candlestick mid-swing and wrenched it from her hands. His other hand closed around her throat, lifting her off the ground with inhuman strength. "Lord Corvain wanted you alive," he hissed. "But accidents happen. Humans are so fragile." His grip tightened. Black spots danced across Elara's vision. Through the bond, she felt Lord Thorne's consciousness reaching for hers, felt him pouring every ounce of strength he had left into their connection. "Use me," his voice echoed in her mind. "The bond goes both ways. Take my strength. Fight." Elara didn't understand how, but desperation made her reach through the bond, pulling at the thread that connected them. Power flooded into her, not vampire strength, but something else: awareness, speed, the ability to see the world as predators saw it, to recognize weakness and exploit it ruthlessly. She saw the vampire's stance, saw where his balance was compromised by holding her aloft, saw the decorative knife on Mrs. Graves's belt, just within reach if she could twist right. Elara stopped struggling against his grip. Instead, she used her momentum to swing her legs up and back, her fingers closing around the knife handle. She yanked it free and drove it into the vampire's eye socket with every ounce of borrowed strength. He shrieked and dropped her. Elara hit the ground hard, gasping, but she didn't stop. Mrs. Graves had taught her silver and wood were traditional, but fire worked too. And the wall sconce beside her still held a burning candle. She grabbed it and hurled it at the vampire, who was clawing at the knife in his eye. The flame caught his expensive suit, and whatever material it was made from went up like kindling. Within seconds, he was engulfed, screaming and flailing. Lord Thorne had recovered enough to move. He crossed the room in a blur and drove his hand through the burning vampire's chest, ripping out something dark and pulsing. The Corvain vampire crumbled to ash, his screams cutting off abruptly. Silence fell, broken only by Thomas's quiet sobbing and the sound of their ragged breathing. Elara, Lord Thorne's hands were on her face, tilting her head to check for injuries. "Your neck, did he?" "I'm fine." Her voice came out hoarse, her throat already bruising, but she was alive. "Mrs. Graves." "Lissa, I'm conscious." Mrs. Graves groaned from the floor. "Just got knocked around. That bastard surprised us." She struggled to sit up, touching the blood on her forehead. "Is he dead?" "Extremely." Lord Thorne helped her up, then moved to examine Lissa. His expression darkened. He fed from her again. Not enough to kill, but enough to keep her weak. "Thomas. Did he say anything else? Any indication of where Corvain is?" Thomas shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "He just showed up and grabbed Lissa." Mrs. Graves tried to stop him and he threw her into the wall. Then he bit Lissa again and said, "We were messages." The boy's voice broke. "I'm sorry. I tried to protect her." "You did protect her," Elara said, kneeling beside him. "You screamed. You got help. That's what heroes do." "She's right." Lord Thorne lifted Lissa carefully. "But we need to leave immediately. If Corvain sent one assassin, there will be others. The court is in chaos. The protections are failing. We go to Thornhaven now." They made it to the Shadow Gate without further incident, though Elara felt eyes watching them from the darkened corridors. The journey through the void was faster this time, Lord Thorne pushing hard, desperate to get them to safety. Thornhaven's wards welcomed them like an embrace. The moment they materialized in the gate chamber, Elara felt the tension drain from Lord Thorne's shoulders. "We're secure," he said. "The wards held against Corvin's first attack, and they're even stronger now. I reinforced them this morning." He glanced at Mrs. Graves. "Get medical attention for yourself and the girl. I'll set additional protections and contact the other houses about increased security." "What about me?" Elara asked. Lord Thorne looked at her, really looked, his silver eyes scanning her bruised throat, her shaking hands, the resolve that hadn't broken despite everything. "You need rest. And we need to talk about what happens next." An hour later, Elara sat in Lord Thorne's study, a cup of tea cooling in her hands, while he paced before the fireplace. The blood bond hummed between them, carrying exhaustion and worry and something deeper neither of them had named. "Corvain won't stop," Lord Thorne said finally. Dissolution doesn't erase his personal vendetta. If anything, it makes him more dangerous. No court oversight, no rules to follow, nothing to lose. So what do? You have options. He stopped pacing, facing her directly. Option 1. I can arrange protection through House Sterling. They have secure locations, resources, connections. You'd be safe, but you'd have to leave your life behind. New identity, new city, complete separation from everything you knew. Elara's chest tightened. That's witness protection. Permanent hiding. Yes. Option 2. You stay here at Thorne Haven under my protection. The blood bond makes you valuable to me in ways that go beyond politics. I would defend you with everything I have. But that means accepting a life intertwined with vampire society, with all the danger and strangeness that entails. And option 3. Lord Thorne's expression softened. There isn't one. Those are your only choices if you want to survive Corvin's revenge. Elara set down her tea and stood, moving to the window that overlooked Thornhaven's gardens. Dawn was approaching. She could see the first hints of light on the horizon. In hours, Lord Thorne would retreat to wherever vampires slept, and she'd be left to make a choice that would define her future. A week ago, she said quietly, I was cataloging property deeds and eating lunch alone and going home to an empty apartment. I was lonely and wounded and hiding from a world that had hurt me. It was safe. It was suffocating. She turned to face him. Then a child screamed in the rain, and I ran toward danger instead of away from it. And I met you. Elara, let me finish. She crossed to him, the blood bond singing with the rightness of being close. You're ancient and dangerous, and you've shown me a world I didn't know existed. You've protected me, trusted me, blood bonded with me. And through this bond, I've felt your loneliness. 800 years of trying to civilize monsters while being one yourself. 800 years of rules and duty, and never letting anyone close enough to matter. Lord Thorne's throat worked. What are you saying? I'm saying I choose option 2. I stay at Thorne Haven. I stay with you. Elara reached up to touch his face, and he leaned into her palm like a man starving for gentle touch. Not because I'm afraid of Corvin, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because when I'm with you, I feel alive for the first time in years. Terrified, yes, but alive. You barely know me. I know you fought at dawn to protect strangers. I know you've spent centuries trying to make vampire society better, even when it costs you politically. I know you looked at a dying girl and a frightened boy and chose principle over expedience. Her thumb traced over his cheekbone. And I know that through this bond, you can't lie to me. I feel what you feel, and you're just as terrified of this connection as I am. Lord Thorne closed his eyes, his hand coming up to cover hers. I've lived 800 years without forming attachments. It's safer that way for me and for anyone who might care about me. This world destroys beautiful things, Elara, and you're the most beautiful thing I've encountered in centuries. Then protect me. Teach me. Show me how to survive in this world. She stepped closer until they were nearly touching. I'm not asking for immortality or forever. I'm asking for right now. For a chance to see where this bond leads. To learn what it means to trust someone again. And when Corvin comes, when other houses target you to get to me, when you realize the cost of being blood bonded to a vampire is higher than you imagine, then we face it together. Elara's voice strengthened. I'm done running from things that scare me. I'm done hiding from life because it might hurt. You said I was brave or foolish. I think I'm both. Brave enough to choose this. Foolish enough to believe it might work. Lord Thorne opened his eyes, and she saw the war in them: hope versus fear, desire versus duty. Then something shifted, settled, and he pulled her into his arms with a gentleness that belied his strength. Then stay, he whispered against her hair. Stay at Thorne Haven. Stay with me. Learn this world. Let me teach you vampire lore and court politics and how to protect yourself. Let me show you what 800 years of loneliness looks like when it finally finds something worth protecting. Elara wrapped her arms around him, feeling his cool skin against hers, the blood bond flaring with shared relief and fragile hope. What about Corvin? We prepare. We strengthen alliances. We make sure he understands that touching you means facing every resource I've accumulated across centuries. Lord Thorne pulled back enough to meet her eyes. And if he's foolish enough to try anyway, we remind him why House Thorne has survived when older, stronger houses have fallen. We survive because we protect what matters. And I matter? More than you should. More than is wise. His thumb traced over the bruises on her throat, and his expression darkened. But yes, you matter. Dawn light spilled through the window, and Lord Thorne flinched slightly. I need to retreat before the sun rises fully. Will you be all right? I'll check on the children. Rest. Process the fact that I just chose to live in a vampire's house instead of running like a sensible person. His smile was small and genuine. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're not sensible. Sensible people are boring. You, Elara Moss, are anything but boring. He kissed her forehead, chaste and careful and full of promise, then disappeared into the shadows. Leaving her alone in his study as dawn broke over Thornhaven, Elara moved to the window and watched the sun rise over gardens that belonged to a vampire. In a house that defied reality, having just made a choice that would change everything, somewhere out there, a vengeful ex-house had plotted revenge. But here, in this moment, Elara felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. And through the blood bond, even in sleep, Lord Thorne's presence remained steady, protective, and quietly, impossibly, hers. The nightmare had become her new reality, and she was ready to face whatever came next. Together, the epilogue note: Elara Moss chose partnership over safety, connection over solitude, and a dangerous vampire over a safe, empty life. Lord Thorne, after 800 years of isolation, finally found someone brave enough to see past the monster to the man still fighting beneath. Their story doesn't end here. Corvain's revenge looms. The Night Court watches with calculating interest, and the blood bond between them will only deepen. But for now, they have each other, Thornhaven's protection, and the fragile hope that even immortals can learn to trust again. The future is uncertain, dangerous, and full of shadows, but they'll face it together, human and vampire, witness and protector, two wounded souls finding healing in the most unlikely of places.